Not everyone who leaves you is a loss. And being alone doesn't always mean you're lonely. Sometimes, silence is the way life chooses to teach you how to become unshakable. We live in a noisy world where presence is measured by likes, messages, and nods of approval. But have you ever asked yourself this? If one day no one texts you, no one claps, no one checks in, would you still be able to hold your peace? I used to think strength meant being loud, fearless, and never shedding a tear. But I was wrong. True strength is when you are hurting but still kind. When you are left behind but do not lose faith in yourself. When you choose to respond with intention instead of reacting out of instinct. Because self-control is not just a skill. It is the foundation of every relationship, every decision, every steady step forward in life. And if you have ever found yourself standing alone in a quiet room, stay there. Because that may not be the end. It may be the beginning of a strength no one can ever take from you. Not everyone who leaves you is a loss. And being alone doesn't always mean you're lonely. Sometimes silence is the way life chooses to teach you how to become unshakable. We've grown so used to having someone to call, to complain to seek a little sympathy when the world turns its back on us. But there will come a time, and I assure you, it will come when life starts removing people from your hands, routines from your schedule, and leaves you alone in a quiet room. No explanation, no warning signs. And in that moment, you'll have to face a question you can no longer avoid. When no one stays, are you strong enough not to fall apart? We often define strength as someone standing firm in a crowd. But the truth is, strength is not proven when people are watching. It is proven when no one is there, when there are no claps, no encouraging messages. When you go through a long day and no one asks, "Are you okay?" That is where true resilience is built. And what sets you apart is how you respond in the moments no one sees. Everyone has instincts. Anger leads to yelling. Loneliness leads to clinging. Pain leads to retaliation. But the truly mature ones are those who stand in the storm of emotions and say, "I choose not to do this." They don't let instinctual reactions take over their self-control. They understand that every behavior they show is a statement about the person they are becoming. Self-control is not numbness. It is the ability to feel everything without letting anything control you. It is when you hear people doubting you and you don't rush to prove them wrong. When you're rejected and you don't lower your worth to be accepted. When you feel left behind and you don't let loneliness drag you back into relationships that only break you all over again. And I know it's not easy. Standing alone has never been easy, especially when you see others with support systems, with love, with friends by their side, while all you have is yourself. But let me tell you something I've learned from the deepest seasons of solitude. It's in the seasons when no one stays that you learn how to stay with yourself. And no one can ever take away the strength that is built in the hours when no one is watching. If you are in a season where silence feels louder than noise, do not panic. Don't try to fill it with cheap connections, half-hearted conversations, or fleeting attention. Let the silence do its work. Let it refine you. Let it show you that you once thought you needed others to stand strong, but in truth, you only needed to learn how to stand on your own 2 feet. So if your phone is silent today, that is not emptiness. That is space for you to hear the voice inside that you've long ignored. If no one asks you how you are, ask yourself. If no one comes to lift you up, stand up slowly, steadily, and remember this. Every time you choose not to collapse, you are building a version of yourself that cannot be shaken. That's why you don't need to wait for someone to give you permission. You are the one rewriting the definition of strength, not as standing under bright lights on a stage, but as standing alone in the dark and still believing, "I will not fall here." Because in the end, not everyone who stays is worthy, and not everyone who leaves is a loss. But the one who stays with themselves 7 in the loneliest seasons, the one who is truly undefeatable. There's something no one tells you when you begin to grow spiritually. Loneliness is not a hole, it is fertile soil. But because we grow up in a world that is always busy, always connected, whenever there are no messages, no calls, no weekend plans, we immediately assume we're failing at the game of being seen. And that's the first mistake. We fear silence because inside it is our own voice, a voice we've ignored for far too long, a whisper that reminds us it's time to pause and look deep within. But we're not used to that. We're used to running from place to place, from person to person, thinking that the more we are surrounded, the more we matter. But have you ever asked yourself, where does your true worth come from? From how others see you or how you see yourself? In truth, loneliness is a mirror, not exaggerated, not distorted, just a reflection of exactly who you are when there's no performance, no audience. And it is in that moment that you see clearly. What are you really living for? What patterns are you repeating? What are you running from and calling it being busy? Because most of what we call a schedule is just a way to avoid facing the emptiness within. There is a very special kind of strength that only grows in silence, the strength of clarity. When you are no longer led by the noise outside, you begin to hear the true rhythm of your own heart. When you no longer perform to please others, you finally realize what you need, what you want, and what you will no longer accept. From that, you begin to build a solid foundation, not from others' perception of you, but from your own awakened presence. Loneliness is also where you learn how to feel whole without needing anyone to validate that for you. You no longer cling to relationships as lifelines, but begin to select them as resonating elements. People are no longer gaps you must fill, but additions you choose to keep. And that changes everything. You'll find yourself rushing less, worrying less, compromising less. Because when you're no longer afraid to be alone, you're no longer easily bought by surface level things. A rejection no longer shakes your trust. A cold look no longer wounds your self-worth. You start to realize someone else's presence is a privilege, not a survival requirement. I used to think silence was the enemy. Then I realized it was only the outer shell. If you're brave enough to sit with it, to listen to the voice you've been avoiding for so long, you'll discover that loneliness is not an empty space. It is a pause that allows you to restructure your entire life. And nothing is more valuable than a decision made in silence that comes from complete clarity. So if today you find yourself stepping away from the crowd, withdrawing from meaningless conversations, turning down unhealthy connections, that does not mean you're becoming distant. It means you're becoming closer to yourself. And I want to ask you this sincerely. When you are silent, are you hiding from yourself or finally finding yourself? Share your answer in the comments. I truly want to hear what's happening inside you. There will come a day when you look up and realize that the people who once promised to stay have left. No sound, no warning. They're just not there anymore. And the most painful part isn't their absence. It's the feeling that you once believed they would stay forever. We've all lived through that moment when the person you thought would walk with you through every storm disappears the moment the sky starts to turn dark. But here's what I want you to remember. Their leaving is not your collapse. No one has the power to define you by how they stay or leave. And you don't need anyone's validation to stand firm, because true strength is not about who loves you long enough. It's about how steady you remain when no one can shake you. Don't let loyalty turn into self-destruction. Some people stay only as long as they're getting something from you, your support, your admiration, your presence. And when you start asking for fairness or simply go quiet to heal, they call you distant. When you set boundaries, they call you cold. When you stop giving, they disappear. But here's what you need to understand. Anyone who disappears when you stop pleasing them is not a loss. They are a filter. You don't have to keep everyone around to prove you're not abandoned. You just need to not lose yourself in the process of trying to keep others. Because every time you force yourself to give more, to hold on, to prove something, you are bargaining away your peace. And that price is always too high. There is a kind of wound that is quiet yet deeply common, the feeling that you have to prove your worth in a relationship. The more you try to prove it, the more it shows that you haven't yet believed you're enough. But you are enough, even without anyone saying so. You are worthy of love, even if someone no longer sees the good in you. And you deserve to be in a relationship where you don't have to exhaust yourself just to be kept. You don't have to become more lovable, more agreeable, less emotional just to make someone stay. Because anyone who makes you trade your truth just to earn their presence, that presence cannot be trusted. It is a condition, not a connection. And what you are building for your life, it cannot stand on conditional foundations. I don't deny it. There will be days when the absence stings. You will miss them. You will replay every moment. You will ask yourself, what did I do wrong? But growth begins when you stop using pain to blame yourself and instead use it to see clearly, to see who is with you because of who you truly are and who is only there for what you bring. And when you begin to move through that phase, you'll understand. Not everyone who leaves is someone you needed to keep. And not every loss makes you weaker. Some losses make you clearer. Clearer about your boundary, clearer about your value, clearer about your direction. You will learn not to cling, not to chase, not to keep knocking on doors that have already closed, because you understand if love requires one-sided sacrifice, then it is bondage, not connection. And if someone chooses to leave the moment you become honest with yourself, then they only loved the pleasant version of you, not the real you. Don't soften your boundaries just to keep people who aren't ready to grow with you. Don't shrink yourself to fit into someone else's small image of who you should be. Because every time you make yourself smaller so someone else can feel comfortable, you are wounding the voice inside you, the voice trying to hold you steady on your path of becoming. So when people leave, let them. No begging, no defending, no explaining. Because sometimes that departure is the one thing strong enough to remind you you were never defined by who stayed. You are only defined by how you stayed with yourself even when others walked away. And that is a kind of freedom no one can take from you and no one can give to you unless you are brave enough to choose it. There is a skill that isn't taught in school, but it will change your entire life if you learn it. The ability to control your reaction in the moments when you feel most vulnerable, not when you're happy, but when you're attacked, misunderstood, provoked. In those moments, you have two choices: react out of instinct or respond with intention. One relieves emotion, the other builds your character. Instinct is easy because it's fast, automatic, coming from the unconscious part of you that has been running the show for years. Someone says something unreasonable, you snap back immediately. Someone disrespects you, you cut them off without a second thought. Someone hurts you, you want them to feel exactly what you're feeling. That's natural. But because it's natural, most people let instinct take over. And then comes the regret. I'm not saying you should suppress everything to number. I'm talking about conscious choice. A pause between trigger and response. A sacred gap where you have the power to decide, will I act from emotion or from values? Will I do what feels good for 5 minutes or what I'll be proud of in 5 years? An intentional response is when you choose silence, not out of weakness, but because you are observing. When you choose not to send that message while angry, because you know words can destroy what took years to build. When you breathe instead of saying things you can't take back. When you choose calm, refusing to let someone manipulate you by dragging you into their emotional storm. There is a special kind of power in not reacting immediately. It forces others to self-regulate. It clarifies boundaries. It keeps you from falling into the trap of react, regret, apologize, get hurt again. A mature person does not chase every challenge, does not need to win every argument, does not need to prove anything to those unwilling to listen, because you understand something crucial. People don't get to decide who you become unless you hand them that control through how you react. and you don't need to become a reflection of what they throw at you. If they're unreasonable, you don't need to respond with coldness. If they're disrespectful, you don't need to respond with anger. You don't react like them, you respond like you. Because your response is not just an action, it is a declaration. Every time you choose to stay grounded, you are saying, I am living by my standards, not being pulled into someone else's chaos. And that takes practice. It doesn't happen overnight. But it becomes clearer with every moment you choose to pause, to breathe, to rethink. And those small acts, they are the bricks you lay in building a grounded self. We cannot control how others treat us, but we can absolutely control how we respond to it. And wherever there is intentional response, there is inner freedom, real strength. A person who can be trusted even when the world is losing control. If the previous part helped you stand tall when others walked away, then this part helps you stand tall even when others try to pull you down. And that is the kind of strength no one can take from you. We are often taught how to make others feel comfortable, but very few people teach us how to protect ourselves without apologizing for it. And so we grow up in a world where kindness is confused with having to endure, where politeness is mistaken for having no boundaries, where declining a call, stepping away from a conversation, or choosing silence is seen as cold, selfish, or distant. But here's the truth that few say out loud: peace is a boundary, not a reward. It doesn't come after everything outside is calm. It's something you build and protect one decision at a time, even when the world around you is chaotic. No one can hand you peace, because if they can give it, they can also take it away. And if you place your peace in someone else's hands, you've already surrendered your power. True peace begins the moment you stop chasing it externally and start creating it from within. That means knowing what drains you and no longer allowing it to continue, no matter who it comes from. Peace is not the absence of conflict. It is the ability to not be torn apart by every little thing. It is when you know someone may disagree and you still don't feel the need to over-explain. It is when you feel the tension in a conversation and you allow yourself to step back without guilt. It is when you realize some people are only there to drain your energy and you refuse to keep giving them access. It sounds light, but living it takes deep awareness, because society won't pause to ask if you're tired, work won't check if you're burning out. The ones who demand the most from you are often the ones who respect your limits the least. And if you don't set boundaries, you'll always live in a state of justifying why you can't give more, do more, endure more. Peace doesn't require you to be harsh. It only asks you to be clear. And clarity may make others uncomfortable, but it sets you free. When you say, I need space, I can't take this in right now, I won't engage in this kind of conversation, you're not being difficult. You're protecting the healthiest part of yourself. No one should have unlimited access to your mind, not because you are closed off, but because you understand that not everyone deserves to enter the sacred space where you nurture your calm. Peace is not about being understood by everyone. It's about understanding yourself deeply enough that you no longer feel the need to justify. You will never feel truly at peace if you're always switched on to serve. If you're always ready to reply, to say yes, to endure, you're slowly losing connection with yourself. Peace isn't in how fast you respond, but in how deeply you know what you need. And sometimes what you need is to not respond at all. Not everyone who knocks deserves the door opened. Not every invitation needs a polite decline. Not everyone who questions you deserves an explanation. And you don't owe the world a pleasant version of yourself if it costs you your clarity and your calm. So if you've ever felt guilty for needing to step back, for not showing up, for not participating, understand this: peace does not require you to be accepted. It requires you to be honest with what you feel. And that honesty is the foundation of a life where you don't have to perform kindness just to be loved. There is a quiet power in knowing how to walk away from a situation without making noise, without a fight, without a closing statement, just a calm exit, clear enough that others understand you are no longer there. not because you are cold, but because you have chosen peace. And when you start living this way, you are no longer swayed by others' emotions, no longer running to match someone else's pace, no longer keeping the peace by sacrificing your own balance. You still love. You are still kind. You are still open to connection, but from a place of steadiness, not dependence. There is a phase in personal growth that you must go through, not with noise, but with disciplined silence. It's the stage when you begin to live truthfully, say no to things you used to agree to just to please others, step away from roles you've long played, and the world starts to react. They won't understand. They'll say you've changed. They'll label you as distant, different, cold, arrogant, Dacian, just because you dared to set boundaries. But you know what? Misunderstanding is often the first sound you'll hear when you start living honestly. And if you're not mentally prepared for it, you can easily collapse. Because no one likes to be misunderstood. No one wants to be accused of motives that don't belong to them. We all want to be seen clearly. But what you must understand deeply is this. You don't need to be understood to be respected. You just need to respect yourself clearly enough not to be shaken by how others perceive you. Don't try to adjust everyone's view of you just to remain likable. The more you try to prove that you're sweet, reasonable, easy to love, the more you erode the truth within yourself. You can't maintain self-respect if every decision depends on whether others see you as lovable. There will be times when you choose what's right and are called stubborn. You walk away and are seen as heartless. You don't reply and are called cold. But maturity is when you understand that sometimes, to live truthfully, you must accept being misunderstood for a while. You have to learn how to stay grounded in the gray zone, where others feel confused because they no longer recognize you in the roles you used to play, and you're learning how not to need their approval anymore. What builds self-respect is not reputation or agreement. It's a question you must answer every day. Am I being honest with myself? Not with anyone else. Not with social media. Not with the expectations of friends, family, or community. Just with yourself. And the miracle is, when you stay rooted in that, even when misunderstood, criticized, abandoned, you won't fall apart because you know you didn't betray yourself. You are still walking, step by step, on a foundation of truth, and no one can destroy that foundation unless you choose to abandon it. There is a subtle kind of pressure that comes from relationships that once felt close and is. When you change, they no longer find you as comfortable as before. And instead of adjusting their perspective, they try to adjust you through criticism, silence, passive distance. But you are not here to live according to someone else's image of you. You are here to live a life of depth, of direction, and of inner strength. You don't need to shrink so others won't feel hurt. You don't need to explain every boundary you set just to avoid being labeled. You don't need to soften yourself just to keep someone around. Love doesn't ask you to disappear within yourself just to be accepted. True love makes you clearer, not more blurry. And if your journey causes some people to step away, let them go. Maybe they could only walk beside the old version of you, the one who always said yes, always showed up, always pushed through. But you don't have to keep playing that role to preserve relationships that are no longer in alignment. No one can take away the clarity you've built for yourself. No one can destroy the values you're protecting unless you let them through your own compromise. So if today you are misunderstood or misjudged, don't rush to explain. Let your way of living speak for you. Because clarity doesn't need a speech. It's shown through consistency. And if you keep choosing the right values, the right boundaries, the right rhythm from within one day, even those who once didn't understand you will begin to respect you. Not because you changed to please them, but because you were steady enough to keep walking even without their approval. And you begin to believe that the only way to avoid pain is to shut off the part of your heart that feels. But that's not maturity. That's extreme self-defense. True maturity is knowing how to love while still keeping limits. To open your heart, but not leave the door wide open for anyone to walk through uninvited. To give, but not to the point of depletion. to help but not carry the entire load, to understand but not grant others unlimited access to your mind. There are people who enter your life to take more than they give. People so used to leaning on you that they treat your kindness as a given. And the more you offer, the more they expect. The softer you are, the farther they push past your boundaries. Until one day, you wake up and realize the exhaustion didn't come from one big hit. It came from 100 times. You didn't say, "That's enough." Love is not about tolerating everything. Kindness doesn't mean endless forgiveness. Understanding doesn't mean you always give someone space to be wrong without ever holding them accountable. You can forgive, but that doesn't mean you must continue to allow. You can love someone deeply, but that doesn't mean you must stay if they no longer respect you. There's a common misunderstanding that if you love enough, you'll endure anything. But love should never be measured against your self-worth. If you have to sacrifice your peace to hold on to love, constantly swallow what hurts you, live in the gray area of doubt and instability, that's not love. That's endurance wrapped in emotion. Real love doesn't pull you away from yourself. It brings you closer to where you can be fully you. It doesn't make you second guess your intuition. It doesn't turn you into a tired, insecure version of yourself that's always trying to prove you're enough. If a relationship constantly makes you apologize for who you are, then you're not in love. You're in a loop of control masked as connection. So when you learn to keep your heart wide enough to love but strong enough not to lose your direction, you stop loving from your wounds and start loving from your wholeness. You give not out of fear of being left, but because you choose to. You stop seeking validation and start seeking resonance. And that changes the quality of every relationship you keep. You begin to realize love is not about holding on. It's about recognizing who is truly meant to walk with you. Not everyone you care for needs to stay close. Not everyone who moves you deserves your full devotion. Not every bond is meant to continue. Some connections are meant only for a short stretch, enough to teach you something, not to anchor you forever. Maturity doesn't make you close off. It helps you open up at the right time and close the door on the wrong people. It makes you choose more carefully. But when you choose, you love deeply and give sincerely. You're not quick to get close, but once you do, it's never halfway. Not because you fear being hurt, but because you know the cost of vagueness and you've lived too long in that space to ever return. So keep loving, but don't lose yourself in the process. Keep giving, but not with all the energy you have. Give from the part you choose to give. Stay soft, but keep your spine straight, because gentleness doesn't make you weak as long as you're still standing when the wind rises. There's a turning point in life that you will never forget. It doesn't come in a loud moment. No fireworks, no spotlight. It arrives on an ordinary day, maybe a morning with no phone calls, an afternoon when you realize someone is no longer there, or a late night when you're simply too tired of needing to be accepted. And you whisper quietly but decisively in your heart, "I don't need to be chosen anymore. I choose myself." From that moment on, your life changes. Not because others treat you differently, but because you treat yourself differently. You begin to walk away from relationships that make you question your worth. You stop sending the messages that keep empty connections alive. You let go of trying to be just enough for everyone, and instead, you become a fuller version of yourself. Not perfect, but clear enough to stop hiding. Because the truth is, waiting to be chosen is a subtle form of dependency. You wait for someone to call first, to find you interesting enough to validate that you are worthy. But every time you wait, you hand over the right to define yourself. And if they don't choose you, you question yourself. You ask, "What's wrong with me?" When the real question should be, do I want to keep living under someone else's judgment? True freedom begins when you give yourself permission to be who you are, whether you're chosen or not. When you walk into a room without needing approving eyes to feel enough. When you make decisions not out of fear of upsetting others, but because you know what aligns with your truth. When you stop seeking validation and start living with integrity. There's nothing wrong with wanting love, recognition, and companionship. But the danger lies in trading yourself to get it. When you shrink, to fit someone else's frame, when you silence your own voice just to preserve a relationship that should have ended, when you abandon your own boundaries in the hope that someone will stay. And do you know what hurts more than not being chosen? Being chosen conditionally. Only if you stay quiet. Only if you're sweet. Only if you don't ask for too much. Only if you don't grow. That's not love. That's control in a sweet disguise. So if today you're standing at a crossroads, hoping to be chosen or choosing to live by what you believe, remember this. You don't need to be chosen to have value. You only need to choose not to abandon yourself. You might not have everyone's support. That's okay. You might walk a stretch alone. That's okay too. But never walk so far away from yourself just to get someone to turn back. Choosing yourself is not arrogance. It's healing. It's the way you speak to the most fragile part of yourself and say, I will no longer let you be hurt by someone else's silence. It's the way you place your hand on your chest, breathe deeply, and affirm, I am here and I'm not going anywhere. From there, you start living by a new standard. No more saying yes just to keep the peace. No more agreeing just to avoid being left behind. No more bending just to be called agreeable. You still love, but you don't disappear. You still care, but you don't compromise. You're still open to connection, but you never ask for permission to be yourself. Because once you choose yourself, you no longer need others to hold you. You stand on your own. You walk forward. And deep within, you've come home to the most trustworthy place on earth, inside yourself. There comes a moment in life when all your old pain no longer has the power to break you, not because you're numb, but because you're awake. You've felt enough, tripped enough, waited enough, returned enough, forgiven enough, explained enough. And at that point, you no longer need to hype yourself up every morning, no longer need another motivational quote to keep going. You only need one decision. I won't look back anymore. That is the final rise. Not the loudest one, but the deepest. It's when you no longer care about winning in someone else's eyes, but only about being true to yourself. It's when you stop fighting for validation and start acting from clarity. It's when you no longer fear being misunderstood and begin living in a way that no longer contradicts who you are. Maturity is not when you say, I don't need anyone. It's when you say, I won't keep hurting myself just to make someone stay. And then you sit with yourself, no justifications, no blame, no avoidance, and say what you should have said long ago, I am enough. Even without applause, even without witnesses, even if no one comes back. When you rise from your lowest point, you don't just move forward. You carry with you a weapon no one can buy, resilience forged in silence. And from that moment, you begin to live with order. No longer reacting in panic to every disruption. No longer sending long messages to explain things people never wanted to understand. No longer shedding tears over those who were never kind enough to hold you with sincerity. You begin to clean up your life. You no longer let temporary people hold permanent power. You no longer allow anyone to walk in and out of your mind like it's an emotional rest stop. You no longer live on someone else's schedule and call it duty. You become the one holding the wheel, not waiting for someone's push, not waiting for an apology to move forward, not waiting for outside signs to know you are worthy. And then you realize the thing that once made you weakest is now your foundation. The pain that once crushed you is now the reason you stand tall. The loss that once broke you is now the place where you learn to keep only what's worth keeping. You no longer use the quiet voice in your head to question if you are enough. You use it to remind yourself every day, I know exactly who I am. From that place, you no longer need to be chosen. You no longer need to be understood. You no longer need to be celebrated. You only need one thing, honesty with yourself and the commitment never to betray what you know to be true. And that's why you don't look back. Not because you're angry, not because you're proud, but because you've learned something vital. There's no real progress if you keep going back to soothe the emotions of those unwilling to grow. Standing up one last time means you stop bargaining with life. You stop waiting for perfect timing. You stop hoping for a beautiful ending from someone who is never writing the same story. You simply walk. But this time, not to escape, but to return to yourself. And on that road, you no longer need a pre-written map, because for the first time in your life, you believe that you are the one truly worthy of your first loyalty. If you've gone far enough on this journey, you will reach a very still place. Not because life has become easy, but because you have become steady. Not because there are no more challenges, but because you are no longer ruled by them, no longer shaken by absence, no longer thrown off by a careless word, no longer losing yourself just because someone turned their back. You stand, not because the world has changed, but because you have. You used to think what you needed was someone who would stay, but now you know the one who needs to stay most is you. Stay with yourself when no one texts, when plans fall through, when someone you trusted walks away, when the whole world goes silent. Stay and don't abandon what you know deep inside, that you've made it through, you've held on to what mattered, and you've learned how not to leave yourself behind again. Don't get it wrong. You are still someone who loves. You're still soft, still moved easily. But beneath that tenderness is a solid rock, unmoved by who comes or goes, a peace that doesn't ask for agreement, a backbone that doesn't need applause, a flame that doesn't need wind to rise. And that kind of strength, no one can give you, because it is forged only when you've stood alone, in silence, in the dark, in the moments. No one acknowledged you when you kept going, not because of motivation, but because you made a promise to yourself never to return to the old version of you. You are not the product of those who loved you well. You are the product of the lonely seasons where you didn't fall apart. You didn't grow strong because of perfect relationships. You grew strong when connections broke and you still chose to hold on to your kindness. You didn't shine because you were chosen. You shined because you learned to choose yourself again and again, even when no one was watching. This journey hasn't been easy. Sometimes it left you scraped and tired. Sometimes you thought you had taken steps back. Sometimes you sat in a quiet room and wondered, was it all worth it? And I want to say to you, yes. Every step you took, every door you closed, every person you let go, every tear you wiped, without anyone noticing, it was all worth it. Because now, you are no longer the one who panics in absence. You are the one who walks, even without a guide. This is not the destination. This is the true beginning. A place where you no longer live to prove anything, but to be present. Where you love without losing yourself. Give without running empty. Step back without feeling like you've failed. Set boundaries without feeling guilty. And keep going, because deep within, peace is a responsibility, not a reward. Walking alone didn't make you hard. It made you strong. It didn't make you careless. It made you wise. And from that place, you don't need to walk fast. You only need to walk true. You don't need everyone to understand. You only need to stop betraying yourself. Because once you've stood up in nights no one saw, you'll never fear loss again. You have become the foundation you use to search for in others. And that is a kind of strength no one can ever replace. You were once left behind, but now nothing can shake you. You have completed this journey, not just in thought, but in the choice you've made again and again. Not to fall, hold on to that, repeat that. Let it become the rhythm of your life. And from this moment forward, you no longer need to be saved. You are the one holding yourself steady. You always have been. Thank you for walking all the way to the end of this journey. I don't know who you are, where you are, or what unspoken weight you may be carrying, but I know this for sure. If you're still here at the very last moment, it means you've been brave enough to face it and strong enough to keep going. I know there are parts of your life where you don't say much, but you're still fighting fighting not to react, not to send that message, not to chase someone to stay, not to live against your truth just to make others comfortable. I know it's exhausting, but please don't forget, every quiet effort you're making today is shaping a steadier version of who you are becoming. You don't need to be perfect. You don't need to be strong all the time. You only need to be honest with yourself, and every day choose again the path of self-control, of clarity, of living unapologetically as yourself. And that means you are doing the right thing. You are holding yourself up. I hope you will always choose what gives your heart peace, even if that means walking away from what you once tried so hard to hold on to. I hope you never let anyone or any pain make you stop believing in your own kindness. And I hope, with all sincerity, that you never lose yourself just to be accepted. We can't control everything that happens, but we can control how we respond. And sometimes the kindest thing you can do is to be still, to breathe, to stay silent, and not betray yourself. Thank you for your patience, for listening, and for choosing to be strong in such a unique way through calm, not noise, through walking forward, not falling down. I hope you always keep the light in your heart. I hope you keep your spine straight when the world tilts. And I hope you keep your hands gentle with yourself in all your loneliest seasons. May you always stay healthy, always stay at peace, and always stay strong enough to be who you are, no matter who walks away, no matter what comes your way. You are not alone, and you are doing better than you think.